I'm Kwaku Lynn, and I'm speaking with the fabulous bass player of Earth, Wind, and Fire, Verdine White. When did you first get involved with music?
I first originally got involved in music really in the early '60s, in Chicago, and coming up from basically a musical family and listening to radio a lot and watching television like the Ed Sullivan Show and things like that. Messing around in school bands and talent shows and things of that nature.
During that time, what was the kind of and type of music that you were listening to most and even playing?
The kind of music that I was playing was a little bit of everything, rhythm and blues. My brother and father thought that I should study classically, so we did that in the day, to learn our instrument. And we listened to a lot. We did a lot of top 10 stuff, at parties and things that most kids do to get going.
Okay, one of the great institutions in black music is Earth, Wind, and Fire. When did the group first begin?
There were actually two sets of Earth, Wind, and Fire. The original group really began in 1968, actually, in Chicago. Then it was reformed again in '70 when I came out, and to California from Chicago. And so that's really how it started, particularly in the early '70s, because the early '70s was really a groundbreaking thing for black artists. That was really the first time where black artists really were taken seriously to do albums, whereas in the '60s, we only really did 45s. And when they found out that there were a lot of black people that bought albums, that paid their money, blacks came into economic prominence in the early '70s as a result of late Dr. King's work, and all of a sudden it raised the consciousness, not only politically but in every facet. So it really, I have to say, Dr. King really was instrumental in making corporate America aware that black music is viable and you can make a profit. That's really, I think, was the key to our success, really.
When Earth Fire formed, particularly when you joined it, what decision was made for the musical direction and the kind of music that you would play?
Well, the decision was not really that hard. Basically, we were just playing things that we thought of in general. At the particular time, black music has gone through several different phases. In the early '70s, it went through jazz, fusion. Middle '70s, then it started becoming more commercial. Then the late '70s became disco, and then now it's getting back to what it was in the early '70s. Now it's gone full cycle again. But the difference today is that white artists are playing much black music as the black artists are today. Because black music has crossed over. And so the decision, that was not a very hard decision. The hardest decisions were where we were going to get placed to record. That was the hardest,
Your first album was done on Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
First two, and then you went to Columbia. Why couldn't Warner Brothers see the value of the group at that time?
Well, at that time it was 1970, and a lot of record companies were queasy about a black investment. And so we did two records for Warner Brothers, and we still did very good. We did 50,000 the first record, 52,000 second record, or something like that. Then Clive Davis became very interested in us at Columbia, and Clive signed us to Columbia, and he understood, and he could get the job done faster at that particular time. Plus, he had a lot of help from Logan Westbrooks, who was at that particular time, I think, I forgot what his position was. And Columbia did a Harvard study on black music. And Clive followed the Harvard study in terms of the viability of black music. And so Clive really made black music his goal, by signing us, Philadelphia International, Isley Brothers, Bill Withers, Herbie Hancock. Miles was already on the label. And so they wanted to make a change because historically, Columbia, from 1923, had never been successful at black music. They had Bessie Smith in the 20s, and they had Aretha Franklin before Atlantic Records had her. And they missed on her. And so I think with Clive wanting to do something great, he really put his foot forward in terms of black music, hired black promotion men that would deal with the black disc jockeys easier. So it opened up a whole lot of doors, you know, and because for us, when we would go to Columbia, we knew all the promotion men, all the disc jockeys. They'd pick us up at the airport. Matter of fact, we were the first group to start that. And they'd pick us up at the airport. We'd sit and talk about the record, and they would tell us, look, man, the next record, do it like this because, you know, we got to get the airplay right. And they would explain things to us, what radio was up to. And then as radio found out that black music could make money, then it expanded to super commercial black music. So Clive Davis, I'd have to say, Columbia Records really understood the early 70s phenomena.
This study that you talked about, I've heard different people talk about it, but no one has been able to really to give me some details. Do you know what the details or the results of that study was?
Well, the result of the study was basically to give an overview of what black music could do. It talked about the different areas. It talked about the economic growth of black music, when it would level off, what prices should be in terms of just, I think, based on the economics of the black population, you know. And I think that study was very important at the beginning of the 70s. I think towards the end of the 70s, I don't think the study was relevant at all because now you had more white people buying black records. So that made the price go up, you know, and it made blacks become quote-unquote commercial. And what the study did do, the study indicated that it should break and re-break groups like LaBelle. The study extended all the way up to 1978, and in the study talked about you should continually develop Michael Jackson. This was 5 years before he was big. So the Harvard study, Columbia followed the Harvard study very closely. They followed it very closely because Clive, being from Harvard himself and an ex-attorney, took a scientific approach to selling black music, you know.
Wow, you're the first one who's really laid it out. Then, in other words, then the academic, scholarly area had some influence on the music industry.
Most definitely, particularly in terms how to market it, particularly the potential, because a lot of people always understand that blacks are relevant in society. But nobody in our society has never been able to break it down and pinpoint those areas where black people would drop their dollars, where black people would, what the economic growth for black people, how they buy homes, how they do a lot of different things, you know. And he took that approach. He took the approach whereas a lot of people say, hey, brothers is happening. But he understood that we were human too, and we go about a certain way about doing what we do like they do what they do. So I think that really what prompted him to take a scientific approach. And him being at Columbia for quite some time before that, he had saw it go around. And I think he saw an area that people had never investigated. People said, well, black music's happening, but he put it on a business level that gave black promotion men opportunities to sell records. It opened up the door for guys like Frankie Crocker, who really gave all of us airplay. You know, without the riffraff that you would get on white stations, you know. So you could be big with your brothers, and you'd have to even be big white. Didn't even matter. You didn't care. Because you still had a support system that enabled you to work, you know. And so it opened up the doors for black promotion men who promoted concerts. Because it was scientific, very scientific. Like, for example, when black shows... When a black person's playing a show on a Friday night, you might not even have a sellout because we operate differently. We're a walk-up audience because we do other things first before buy a ticket. Whereas the other audiences, the white audiences, camp out overnight if Bruce Springsteen's in town. So I think Clive understood all these little idiosyncrasies about us and put them into a scientific capsule scenario and made it work.
Well, you said when you started, promotion men picking you up at the airport, talking to you about the records and how it should be done. What influence do you think those promotion men and other executives had on how you would compose, arrange, and record your music for the audience?
The influence would be they never told us what to do. They would just we would talk casually, just very casually, and it was just a matter of letting us know what was going on around the rest of the country, and we would adjust our sound accordingly. And it was loose. It was very loose. It was a very comrade. It was a comrade type of thing. We were peers, and very accessible. It was very matter of fact type, and a lot of fun. A lot of the people who were promotion men at the time, people like Jerry Griffith, who's now at Manhattan Records, good close people like that. Armin McKissick, a lot of people. We just would all sit and just talk. There was more you could interact more.
Could you give me a sort of a musical, historical development of Earth, Wind, and Fire from when you got involved with it and you went to other plateaus musically? Could you sort of describe that?
Like I said earlier, we originally started jazz fusion. We were actually really started as a jazz group because in the early 70s, radio was just FM. So if you had a good album, it was cool. You didn't have to worry about really hit singles. In the middle 70s, we kind of moved slightly commercial, kept our base. Then we started crossing over a little bit. And then we crossed over a lot, where we started actually having more white audiences than black audiences. And then we got into sort of a rock and roll thing, which kind of got us off base a little bit, because I think at that particular time, the whole industry had changed. The executives had changed. It became very corporate. You were considered a commodity. So orders would be sent down to you about what kind of records you should cut, which doesn't work for everybody. And I think Earth, Wind and Fire, we've never made that many mistakes, but I think that's the one big mistake we made. That we didn't, those executives at that time were inaccessible. So you had to sort of get orders, from up top. And whereas when Clive worked with us, it was very personable. Very personable. And now we're getting back to the point where we're doing what we're originally doing. Just do good music and not worry about what executives think,
At the point that you crossed over and started to getting those white audience, basically, what did you do musically? What were the technical musical things that allowed you to cross over?
Nothing technically, just more white-sounding songs. When we were just a black audience, we would do more like Head to the Sky, things that we relate to. We Are People of the Mighty, which our people related to, whereas you couldn't do that on white radio because they would think it's black power based. We just started doing more white type of songs, and it was cleaner. It was more homogenized. When we would do for black audiences, we would play a little bit more, not as technical. Not technical. We didn't even hardly mix the stuff. Just play it and just put it out as it was. As we got to white radio and trying to be on K-Earth 101 at the time or Kiss FM, very clean, all that kind of stuff.
When you talk about that, like in the 70s, there were like two really differences between the Motown sound and the Stax sound, or James Brown. James Brown recorded strictly for black. I mean, his music was strictly black music. And Stax, a lot of the Stax artists were a lot raw black music, whereas Motown began to do some things to get on like a WABC in New York, the pop stations and things like this. So they added like string pads and horns and things like this. So would you say Earth, Wind, and Fire made some adjustments to cross over into that pop market? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, we made adjustments. I think Motown was really the first crossover acts. Their acts were always clean. Mr. Gordy always looked at Motown as not black music, but American music. And he crossed over. Plus, also, I think Mr. Gordy had an advantage on all of us in the fact that he had done a lot of things. He was a songwriter. He was a producer. He was used to work in retail. So he was he had a broad view of what the industry. Actually, he is still quite ahead in terms of his view, whereas the rest of us had to catch up to him in terms of the broad view, because we were just basically musicians, and musicians don't think like businessmen, so he did things like that, light, good sounding, not offensive type sounding music, whatever people consider offensive,
If there were specific areas of black music, say in the 60s when you got on the scene and up to this point, There are different plateaus. I don't know if you can put it in a category of categories or differences, but like the difference between a Sly Stone and a Prince, a Barry White and a Stevie Wonder. How would you sort of divide the major elements of black music sort of from the 60s to the 80s, and who those most influential artists and groups were, like yourself, Earth, Wind and Fire?
I always thought that Sly was the most innovative, Sly Stone. He did more in 2 albums than most people do in a whole career, you know. He was really the first black act that sold big albums. He was the first cat. A lot of people don't know that today. And Prince really got a lot of his stuff from Sly, you know, in the sense of that kind of daring, I don't give a damn, I'm going to drop it type music, you know. Barry White always has great grooves. He does more with 7 guitars and strings, you know what I mean. James Brown always was funky, you know what I mean. And that really was the strength of black music from the late 60s, or the 60s to really the late 70s. I think black music is getting back to that, because I think black music went to a point whereas all black groups had to be this way, or you had to be this way. And the beauty of black music, the reason black music has always been strong, because we've had so many different types of acts, you know. Sometimes it would bother me personally that sometimes when a black act gets big, all of a sudden the other black acts have to be like the biggest black act. So it robs you of your creativity, it robs you of your individuality. So I think it's getting back to that. And also to Marvin Gaye. You know, Marvin Gaye, What's Going On was really one of the first albums that really talked about Vietnam and the social things. He was the first cat to talk about social stuff, him and Sly. You know, we did a little bit. We talked more about spiritual and cosmic stuff, you know. Prince talks more about sexuality, you know. And James Brown was just always, you know, funky, you know, and whereas we all got from each other, all of us.
Where would you put the category of someone like Jimi Hendrix?
He was in a class by himself, and also too, he didn't live long enough to get a category. Had he lived, I think he would have been triple times what Springsteen would have been. I don't think had he lived, I'm not sure if there would have been a Prince. Because I'm not sure if anybody would have been as good as him, you know. But what he did provide for all of us was to give white America a chance to say, "Hey, man, them brothers is bad," you know. Because when they're looking for you, looking for all of us, you know. And so he was in a class by himself, very much so.
How would you rate blues as being part of our music, whether it's traditional music, gospel music, popular music, rock music? Where does blues fit in all of this?
I think blues is a catalyst. I think out of any form of music, I think blues guys opened the door for us and didn't have the same opportunity to make money. You know, the 70s and the 60s, late 60s, 70s, 80s, had been a celebration period, you know, for us. You know, we get a chance to make music and make money and be in record companies and stuff like that. Whereas the blues is really a reflection of the pain that they had to go through. You know, the pain from the South. You know, because there were a lot of great blues guys, man. You know, never made a dime. So I think they were the catalyst. They planted the seed for cats like us, you know, to play off of. You know. That's what I think.
In black popular music today, do you think or feel that there are any African influences within the music, rhythmically or structurally or any type of way, consciously, any way that you can see, or even in Earth, Wind and Fire's music, do you see any African elements involved?
Yeah, for us, we use a lot of African elements. For the kalimba, for instance, a lot of congas that Philip Bailey plays. The man that had a lot of influence on us was the late Charles Stepney, musically. He was like what Quincy Jones is today. And we always, in our head, even today, think that had he lived, he passed away about 10 years ago, had he lived, him and Quincy would have been neck and neck. because they were of equal talent, of equal mentor-type people, arranger, fatherly figures, and those are good in the studios. Those are very good for kids, So in terms of, but today's pop music, I don't hear many African influences. I think today, more white people respect our African influences than most black people today. I do personally. I mean, I could be wrong, but I do think that they respect it, because I think that any white artist today, when he really wants to that groove, he go gets those black artists. He go get a black band behind him. I think Paul Simon just got through doing an album for Warner Brothers of all African stuff. Of course, Phil Collins used our horns. David Foster loves black musicians. When they want their brothers, Bob Dylan has a black band. So I think they respect it. They respect it more than we do, because we're constantly, as a whole, trying to always keep up. So sometimes we're trying to keep up, we give up what is really happening for us.
When you were speaking about orders coming from the executives who were basically non-accessible, how much control do record company executives have over the direction and development of music by black groups?
I think more so today than ever, because the profit margin is higher. And I think record companies got scared when the bottom fell out in 1980. The bottom totally fell out in the record companies. And I think record companies said from then on they would never let us have control. And
creative control?
Well, not creative control, but being monitored. We were never monitored. But of course we were different. We were organized, disciplined. We had very few problems, whereas a lot of groups that came in back of us, I think, had more problems than we did. A lot of groups, were more promiscuous with what they were doing, musically, watching the budgets. So it made everybody else have to fall in line, and we've all spent big money at one time or another making a record. But it got to a point where record companies really wanted to help set a direction, because, music has moved so fast lately. You've had the Michael Jackson phenomenon, you've had Madonna come on the scene, you don't know who's next. So record companies monitor that, and so sometimes when something new happens, everybody else has to fall in line. Like for instance, over at Columbia, when Michael Jackson was selling all those albums, it made it difficult for the rest of us, no matter what you've done in the past. You had to wait your turn, because that was a priority. The company was focused on that and that only. Whereas I think in the 70s, they were not only focused on us, they were focused on Kenny Gamble, they were focused on Herbie Hancock, Bill Withers, Isley Brothers, So I think that made record executives have to go for profit margin. Corporate America took over.
How do they specifically exert this control?
Well, it's not even done in specifics. It's done it's done very casually. Nowadays, they like to pick your songs nowadays. Nowadays, they like to, they listen to the album. If they don't think it's a good album, they won't put it out. So that wasn't like that before, because you have to look at it from their standpoint too. I mean, they're putting out a lot of dollars now. They got to do videos now. They have to do a lot of things. So they're looking at their profit margin more, because the board of directors says, look, you made $300 million this year. Great. 10% more next year. We're going to fire 600 people. So because most of the black people that worked at Columbia when we started are not there today.
How would you compare the importance of black radio 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, as compared to today?
Black radio is equally important today as it was 15 years ago, but for different reasons. Black radio was important then because you could get on the air. If you got good music, the brothers would play it. Frankie would always play our stuff. It was great, or WDAS would always play our music, or Chicago would play our music, or we'd go to Detroit, they'd play our music because they dug the music. And disc jockeys could play any record they'd like as long as it was good. Nowadays, black radio has a playlist that they have to operate by, whether it's good or not, and they have to have a list on the wall, so they have to play those hits. And black radio needs advertisement. So it's very, very important, but black radio is constantly trying to keep up. They're trying to keep up too, so they can have advertisers that come. and keep them alive. So what that makes them do is to pigeonhole the music. So it makes us all have to kind of go for that hit. So it makes sometimes people get upset that albums aren't as good as they were pound for pound, because artists are a little bit under more pressure today. They have to have that hit record. It's just not enough just to be good anymore.
So would you say radio and the other business elements involved have somewhat of an influence on how you do a record?
I do, yes. I do. I mean, all of us before we go in the studio always thinks about, what do you think radio's going to think? Whereas we didn't think about it before. We would say, oh man, it's bad. It's great. Or whereas before you would say, man, we got one hit on this album, I'm going to hold the other 2 hits for the next album. Today you say, I'm going to put as many hits on one record as I can, because the market may change tomorrow. It may be a type of music that none of us are qualified to do properly.
What do you think the infusion of synthesizers and computers? You hear so much music now, it sounds mechanical if you really listen to it, almost homogenizing a lot of black music. What do you think, as an artist and musician, that is doing to our music?
I think it's somewhat made us not be as good musically. I think it makes kids today think that they don't have to be as good. You know what I mean? I think they think that all I have to do is just, plug up some synthesizers and I can be happening. Whereas before, when I first started, you couldn't get into a band unless you could play your instrument very well. Whereas today, it almost does it for you. But what it does, I think it's making people who buy records not buy them as fast, because it's not true. But what's happening, your white artists today are leaving those synthesizers alone and playing real music. And it's us that are trying to be mechanical. And I think that in order for us to really get back, we have to have a little balance of both. A little balance of both. Because synthesizers are good. They are good because you have some fine synthesizer masters, Larry Dunn, Michael Bodiger, Robbie Buchanan. They all know synthesizers very well and are proficient and professional and pros at that. So, but I think it's got to get a proper balance. I think we got a little bit too much, crazy with it.
How would you, as an artist, being a veteran in the business, describe or analyze this great phenomenon that's going on among the black youth now? Like, their top music is rap. How would you describe or analyze that yourself as an artist musician?
I think it's great. You should mention. Yeah, it's ironic you should mention, because I'm doing a project for Warner Brothers with rap music. I just got through doing it. It was great. It was great. And when I recorded the album in Washington, D.C., and I'm mixing out here. And that's when I was there the day I saw you. And I think it's great. I think it's great because I think what those kids are doing through rap, they are expressing themselves through rap like our leaders did in the 60s. Because we've had so much music that no one has expressed themselves in our generation in the 80s. They don't have any way to express themselves except talk it out. And what I learned from them is that it's an art form within itself. And they understand it. And I think it's great. I don't even think it's begun to reach its peak. And it's an art form. I think it's so new that sometimes our generation might not understand it, or people older than myself think it's trash. But when I did this stuff, I put horns on it. I made it good music within the rap flavor itself to match the art form. I think it's great because that's the way they express themselves. And they express themselves very, in a beautiful way. It's very, very prolific.
Why do you think such a great musical form like reggae never really made it in this country? Although it was big everywhere else in the world, but here it just never could get over the hump, even though Bob and a few others did everything they could to try to establish it, but it never really made it here.
Because America's sociology didn't meet that. It was a social thing. Reggae is social and spiritual. It's not commercial. It didn't fit the image mode that most blacks have of music, even though it was good. It was more underground. It was all of us who are successful. The one thing that we all have in common is that our appeal has appealed to the image of American socialism. Big concerts, making money. That's social. It matches the social ideas. Reggae never did that. You're not going to find a lot of people that's going to dread up. It didn't meet. Socially, it didn't meet. That's why blacks rejected it. Not because they didn't like it. It just didn't meet. Your biggest reggae stars, they don't drive Rolls Royces or Mercedes or limousines. They never was into that. Whereas socially, we all matched that. And we talked about things that was basically on everybody's mind in America. Because we're from Chicago, urban, Motown's from Detroit, Kenny Gamble, Philadelphia. So it matched the social ideas. We were a product of what's going on socially, whereas reggae didn't really socially match what we were thinking. On the weekends, we watched the game. They're not into it. They said the descendant of David was Haile Selassie, whereas black Americans don't believe that. They don't even know who he is. And the reason that Bob, I think, was the most successful out of all of them because he aimed more, and also too, Bob had a look that could appeal across the board. Basically, even with dreads, he had a look. And had he lived, he'd have been a superstar. And had he still lived, the music would have gotten much more commercial.
Would you say the same thing is true of like some of the top African artists like Fela Kuti, Sunny Ade?
Yes.
In Brazil, you have Gilberto Gil, Milton Nascimento. Would you say the same thing?
Exactly. Matter of fact, we did a concert with Gilberto Gil. He sang a tune with us called Reos with us in Brazil. And I think, exactly, I think America is so commercial that everything here is because of what we think of socially here. And if it doesn't fit in, it's not going to get over, even if it's good. Gilberto Gil is a political activist from over there. And they have overseas, like reggae music and things like that, African artists. Their social agendas are much different. Their reasons for doing things are much more different than it is here. Whereas here we make music because we love it, but we want to make money. We like to get Grammys. We like to get Oscars. We want to be noticed. Whereas there, they don't care about that. We want to be on People magazine. We want to sell a lot of records. They don't care about that there. And so I think that's one of the reasons, because the social agenda is totally different.
How is black popular music? I mean, you've been all over the world, I don't know how many times, but how is it accepted outside of this country from your experience?
It's accepted greatly. Greatly. I think sometimes they can't understand why we do what we do here. When you go over there, you're not limited to the top 10. It's an honor to be able to play great. They feel that it's a God-given thing to play great. They are very. They feel you're very blessed to be able to play great. They treat you like a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. Here, people say, "Well, you're great," but look, the box office didn't look good. Whereas it's commercial here. It's commercial. So that limits sometimes us being able to be wonderful, wonderful artists. Sometimes we don't really get a chance to be as good as we could be because we have to limit ourselves to commercial things. And because it takes a tremendous amount of courage in this country to play music the way you want to play it and not care about the system. So they really dig our music. And they love history. They know about historical parts of our music that we don't even know because we have a very disposable society here. The people don't even remember what happened last year. Whereas there, they remember your records. They know what you did in 1970. They know the records you produced. They know what kind of instrument you play. They know a lot about you.
Do you think the era is gone and past of the great jazz artists like we had the Miles and the Coltrane's and the Parkers, etc.? Do you think that era has gone and it's just sort of sitting there with the older generation who appreciate it?
Nope. I think it's getting ready to make a resurgence. Because if you notice, Miles is in good health now. Miles is back out there on the track. Sarah Vaughan did the Statue of Liberty thing 2 weeks ago. No, I really don't think so, because I think now America's consciousness, they're starting now in America to want to be hip again. America's starting to ask themselves questions now about their moralities. They want more substance, I don't think America really wants to be, they want to be hip again. They want to be hip, and I don't think jazz is just sitting. I think it's coming up slowly but surely.
Does the social, cultural climate of the times have an influence on the kind of music that is created, such as James Brown, I'm Black and I'm Proud, when he did it then, may not be appropriate now, but a lot of the music in the 60s, early 70s was a little more socially conscious than now. Do the times, the social matrix in the society, have an influence on the type of songs that are written?
Yes, in the 70s, it was an offspring of the 60s. What people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm, even your white activists were singing, like Bob Dylan at that time, Peter, Paul, and Mary. It was more social, whereas today it's a little bit more commercial. If you notice that when Prince slipped through in the late 70s, early 80s, that was really when a lot of gay music was happening, offspring of disco. And gays really ran disco. So a feminine type of artist could come through the door, whereas in the early 70s, you couldn't be that way. Nowadays, everything is unisex. You're not limited. Whereas that's the kind of society we live in today, because we're not dealing with social issues in America as we were in the 60s. It is here, like with South Africa and different things like that, but within the structure of America, that's not the criteria right now. So whatever social climate, you'll definitely see what kind of music will come out of it. Like when Sly came on the scene, he was so hip because he came out of that particular social thing.
In the music business, they say music is not enough. What does it take to make a hit record? I mean, Earth, Wind, and Fire comes up with a bad track, that's just gone. What does it take to make it a hit?
It takes, to me, first that groove. Second, it takes the song, lyrics, how it's structured, and sometimes a hit is not necessarily good music either. It's just what people like. So it takes all of those ingredients. And it takes an ingredient that is the music speaks for itself. You can't talk on a hit. You just got to have it. You ain't. That's what they say.
What about on the other side, on the music side? You've described what it takes, but what about on the business side? What does it take to make a hit?
On the business side, it takes a record company that believes in the record. It takes good promotion. It takes radio staying on the record to give it a chance for people to like the record. From that standpoint, that's generally what it takes. It takes ads and trades. It takes, if the artist is a visual artist, it takes videos. It takes those elements. It takes a good A&R staff to hopefully pick the right single for the artist. It takes the artist in interaction with the record company, so the record company can understand where the artist is coming from, what they would like to accomplish with a given record or a given career. It basically takes a fusion of ideas. It's a give and take scene.
Where do you see black music today? I mean, you've gone through a whole era of it. All what's happened today is because of what happened in the past. Where do you see it today?
I see it redefining itself. It's like black music again is in its adolescent stage. People are trying a lot of different things. And I think that it will probably in the next couple of years really click, because I think that the artists today who are making black music will understand why they're making it. There's been so many different eras in the last 3 or 4 years that it's really made black artists on some levels get a little confused. You know, because like I said before, when one artist gets big, if a Prince is big, then all the other kids think they have to be like him, which is not true, because Prince didn't have to be like us, and he didn't have to be like really anybody. You know, he borrowed things, but we did too, though. All of us who are successful borrow things that are good. You know, we all do. You know, so black music right now is redefining itself. I think that people like Quincy Jones have really helped greatly with black music. Everybody has, you know. I point out certain people who have kept, you know, the vibe alive in terms of giving it quality. You know, I think a lot of your black artists will go for quality in the future.
What do you think of an artist like a Sade, you know, who is a black artist and has that African element because she was born in Nigeria, but I guess it's mixed blues, jazz, and pop together. What do you see that kind of music expanding and going further?
Yeah, I think so. I think the mere fact that she lives in Europe gives her a chance to play music like that. I don't think that if she had come directly out of America, I don't think that she would have even got on the radio. I think because she was from Europe, I think because she was attractive, I think because visibly being able to be accessible for video, all of those elements helped. And she just basically played music that they respect in Europe. They play a lot of that stuff like that all the time.
Why do you think there are so many white artists today playing black music?
Because they always have. Most of your great white artists have always played black music. Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley basically was Chuck Berry, you know. And the Beatles, you know, got all their stuff from Little Richard. Not all their stuff, but they mixed it up. But publicly it was not hip to play black music. A white artist did his research on black artists and said, boy, I really love that sound, you know. But they couldn't do it. Whereas now radio and the world says it's okay, it's acceptable to play a black song now. Because black music is happening, you know, so you can do it.
Does that harm black artists? Say like a black artist does a song, this has been happening historically, and a white artist will cover it. Has that really done any appreciable harm to black artists?
50-50. I think it does harm when a black artist thinks that he has to be white, you know. And I think it does harm when black artists can't do black music. That's when it's harmful, you know. And it does harm when black people think they don't have to do black music. You know, that's when it's harmful. Otherwise, not really, because white artists are always going to copy black artists. They're always going to do that. They're going to always do that.
I guess that almost answers the question that I've heard from many blacks and whites, that if it wasn't for black music, there would be no white music, pop music.
Yeah, from an American standpoint, yeah. You know, because the role that blacks have had in America in building up the country and working has transcended to the music, because basically music is all basically black people. That's all we've really had, really. Now we're starting to have more professions in sports, but we always only had music, basically. You know, whereas, you know, a lot of other people have just not always had music. They've had opportunities and trust funds and different things like that to lean on, whereas we've always just thought about music. For the most part, you know, singing in the street and on the lanterns, and, you know, most of us play from the streets, you know, and harmonies and talent shows. That's really how we learn, and that's really all we've always had. So that's always going to be with us. So that's been our gift, you know, I think, to society. You know, I was a little bit disappointed when they did the Statue of Liberty that they had on a jazz thing, that they thought that Manhattan Transfer represented what jazz was about. A group of us was watching it, and I think that harms black music, because it makes an audience who are not aware of black history thinking, oh, wow, you know what I mean? Wow, why don't you guys do something like that? Not knowing that we've already done that and everybody else has already done that, you know. Those things, personally, I don't like. I don't like those things, personally, because, I mean, they should have honored Miles. I think they should have honored Quincy Jones, Ella. You know, there's a lot of people that really opened up a lot of doors for us, you know, that if it hadn't been for them, we wouldn't be here, you know.
Verdine, where is Earth, Wind, and Fire today, and what is your musical direction now?
Well, we've been sort of debating about the sounds. we're going to do what we've always done, good music. I think we were caught into when you become successful, you have to keep that successful thing up. And I think we've transited that we don't have to do that anymore. I think for a while we had to get locked into what radio was doing, which we're always going to be aware of. But now, you know, we're going to go more in making good music because we feel that that's what's coming back. I think American music has been through a lot. It's been through a lot the last 10 years, you know. And for us, you know, we're going to do what we do best, good music. You know.
There are many people, particularly in our generation, who say the best black music was made really toward the end of the 60s and up to the mid-70s, maybe into the later 70s. How do you feel about a statement like that?
Well, it all depends on what generation you're from. I'm sure that when the rappers get to be 40, they'll figure that what they did was the best. A cab driver in New York City a couple of weeks ago, I was renting a cab in New York City, and he said Sinatra was the best. So I think it all depends on what generation, you know, that you're from. You know what I mean? I think the common denominator that it probably will all be considered the best. That sticks out will be considered the best. You know, I think the late 60s got a lot of attention because there were a lot of other things that were going along besides music. You know, we were fighting for civil rights. We were getting positions. We started getting positions of power. We started doing very well, you know, we were recognized as a people. So I think that really probably made people stick out with music a lot.
You know, you've said this over and over again. I didn't pick up on it till just now. You said about the third time, but evidently the civil rights era had a great influence on the evolution and acceptance of black music.
Yeah, it did because black music had always been around. But black music had never been condensed in a commercial form that corporations could think that it could be profitable. In the late 60s, early 70s, you didn't have any black A&R men. You know, whereas now you have Larkin Arnold over at Columbia, you have Benny Medina at Warner Brothers, you have John McClain at A&M Records, you have Gerald Busby at MCA Records. Whereas, you know, we didn't have this before. We didn't have those opportunities not only for artists but for executives in corporate America to be able to cue white America, corporate America, on what was happening in black. You know, whereas I'm sure Larkin is a tremendous conveyor of information to corporate America. Because corporate America will ask him, hey man, what's happening? Well man, this is happening, that's happening, this is happening. Because it's two different social contexts. No more different than most black people don't go to bar mitzvahs, so they wouldn't know about that. You know what I mean? So it's a social thing, you know, and so the black executives now are starting to be in a position to take advantage of the civil rights movement, you know, because the civil rights movement really opened up a lot of doors because white America had to pay attention. They had to say, man, look. They had to pay attention because the leaders of the civil rights were very intelligent. They were not flakes by no means. By no means, as you can see with the Martin Luther King Day. You know, it was real, and it was very important.
You know, in the 60s and 70s, we fought to be a part of. You know, we wanted to get in. But now in the 80s, it seems that thought has elevated to not just being a part of, but owning. Do you ever see the day that there will be a major black record company who not only just produces songs, which we already do now in large numbers, but I'm talking about handling independently the marketing, the distribution, the promotion, the advertising, the whole thing, being a major independent black corporation, getting to the status of being a major? Do you see that ever evolving?
I think it could happen. But I think in order for that to happen, I think it would have to take, I personally think that you would have to limit it beyond just being black. You would have to limit it beyond black because due to the fact that black music transcends the whole world, you just can't limit it to just black. And whatever blacks are in it, they have to be astute enough. They have to be on it. You know, they have to know what they're talking about. They have to be there because you have to recognize you're responsible for people's lives. These are people's music. They're just not stuff they just sing off the street. That's their stuff. That's their life. So it really has to be Organized, organized.
All throughout the industry, people have pointed to one person saying the same thing, that Gerald Busby is the top black executive in the business today. Do you have any idea as to why so many people say that?
Well, first of all, Gerald is a professional. Gerald has been in the business a long time. He was over at A&M. He did quite a few things before then. He understands black music. He's accessible. He's a nice guy. I think John McClain is doing a great job at A&M, particularly with Janet Jackson, because John understands music. He's a street person. He signed Jesse over there. But I think Gerald Busby is great because he understands both ends of it. And although he is corporate, he keeps a proper balance. And he talks to the artists, which artists we always all need talking to, you know.
And finally, as I'm writing, young artists today who have the hopes and dreams, they come to a record company with their whole life in their hand on a tape. If you were advising young artists today, you were sitting in a classroom and here are all these young musicians, all talented, want to get into the business, what advice would you as a veteran and a successful artist, musician in the business give to young people?
First of all, know what you're doing. Know your craft inside and out. Give yourself time to develop. Be concerned about your success, but don't take your success so seriously that it trips you out. Because you have to understand there will always be people who are less successful than you and more successful than you. Work hard. They joke, save you money. Go for it. Go for it. You know, try to go into the industry wanting to make a difference. Because if you go in there wanting to make a difference, you will make a difference. Although this is an emotional business, learn how to give in not to your emotions but to your values. You know, you don't have to smoke dope. You don't do none of that to be hot. You don't have to do any of that. Just do what you do. And, you know, because you can be successful and keep your soul. You can. You know, so just be on it. Just be on it, man. You know, go for it, man. You know, just knock them doors down and go for it, man.
Well, Verdine White, bass player for Earth, Wind and Fire, producer, musician, all-around music veteran person and nice person. Thank you very much for this interview.
Hey, thank you. Good luck on your stuff.